Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. Everyone has heard the joke about the young adult just on their own, and they're at the store trying to write a check for their stuff. And the clerk turns to the young person and says, "There is no money in the account." And the person turns to the clerk and says, "Of course there is. I still have checks." Yeah, oldie but a goodie, I know. But besides the fact that no one knows what a check is anymore, so you know it's an old one, the principle still remains here. Financial principles are very important. Unfortunately, politicians don't play with their own money. They play with ours. If it was their own family funds and finances were tight, they would budget better and concentrate on things that they need and cutting out things they don't need. But since it's not their money, they just spend more and more without any restraint at all. They don't care. They just tax more. Oh, we don't have to really cut anything. We just need to bring in more money from the taxpayers. And that's the way it's been. That's the way it's been until Donald Trump was elected. From the Daily Wire comes this. It says, the Trump administration this week slashed $1 billion with a B dollars in so-called mental health grants for education institutions, many of which were going to promote leftist ideology and train leftist activists, believe it or not. The Education Department confirmed Wednesday that it was making cuts to grants handed out by the Biden administration, ostensibly for the purpose of mental health, because of the focus on many of the recipients on racial-focused programs. In a notice to Congress, the administration said it was going to re-envision and recompete the funds allocated for mental health at schools in a gun control bill signed by former President Joe Biden. Quote, "These grants are intended to improve American students' mental health by funding additional mental health professionals in schools and on campuses." That's the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Communications, Madison Bennerman. And he said, quote, "Instead of under the deeply flawed priorities of the Biden administration, grant recipients used the funds to implement race-based actions like recruiting quotas in ways that have nothing to do with mental health and could hurt the very students that the grants are supposed to help." Well, the move was first reported on Tuesday by Christopher Rufo, who wrote on X that there would be, quote, "no more slush fund for activists under the guise of mental health," unquote. That's good news, right? In March, the conservative organization Defending Education put out a report finding that the Department of Education had given at least over $100 million in grants to 25 universities to increase their social worker training programs, ostensibly for the purpose of mental health. Defending Education found that many of these grants were going to programs steeped in leftist ideology. This money was allocated through the Mental Health Service Professional Demonstration Grant Program. Yeah, that's a mouthful, right? And the School-Based Mental Health Services Grant Program as well. For example, Portland State University was awarded $1,189,801 by the Department of Education to increase the number of social workers. DEI principles are built into the school's Master of Social Work program. The stated goal of which is to train social workers to dismantle, here it is, systems of oppression, build racial equity and social, political, and economic justice, unquote. That is DEI. Quote, "The grants were meant to support school counselors and mental health staff. In reality, They became a pipeline for training activist educators steeped in DEI, CRT, and gender ideology. Federal dollars went to universities pushing anti-racist social emotional learning and racially um, preferential hiring. This is what comes from the Defending Education President Nikki Neely on Thursday, saying parents want real support for children in crisis, not counselors or social workers trained to divide, shame, and re-educate. Good on the Trump administration for ending this. Now, let's make sure the replacements actually serve students. So, again, here it was about $1 billion going to grants to do nothing but create social activists. And that is a waste of taxpayer money. It's not like we're not in debt as a country or anything, right? It's not like we don't have $36 trillion in debt as a country. That's not like that at all. I mean, yeah, we can just, we can burn money as far as anybody cares, right? Wrong, right? We are in debt, and we are putting our debt onto our children and our grandchildren and our great grandchildren at this point. Um, and that's why DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, it has been so good and has really done some great work. The Department of Government Efficiency has helped federal agencies terminate 8,500 contracts, saving taxpayers up to $160 billion in the first 100 days of President Donald Trump's second term. This is what it said. And it also acts nearly 10,000 grants totaling $33 billion, including many from that USAID that we've talked about. It's terminated nearly 650 leases, including and resulting in about $311 million in savings. Just terminating those leases on office buildings and things like that the government did not need and weren't even using. That totals about a fifth of $1 trillion that Elon Musk hoped to cut from the federal budget through many of the big ticket savings, and they were costs set to be spread over multiple years, and it remains to be seen whether it can keep cutting at the same pace, or whether the trajectory will slow with low hanging fruit exhausted type of thing. Was this the type of thing where, wow, here's the stuff that everybody can see just hanging out there, and now it's going to slow down because we're going to have to dig a little deeper. Who knows? But we'll only time will tell there. But Musk has said that he will soon spend significantly less time on DOGE as he returns focus to his private companies. And he is currently classified as a special government employee at this point, which means that he can only serve 130 days per year anyway. So yeah, the agency is already set up. It's already doing its thing. That doesn't really worry me much. But other savings, not included in those figures that we just talked about, are likely to be realized over the long term, thanks to a process reform spurred on by DOGE. That includes revamping how federal expenditures are tracked, requiring each outlay to have an explanation, and cross-referencing the expenditures with other databases to stop fraudulent and disallowed payments. So that's part of how DOGE is actually doing their job. DOGE's most important accomplishment may be shaking up Washington's culture, though, with a kind of a new spirit of optimism and creativity. I mean, for me, at least on a personal level, I love to see this kind of stuff. This is something we have not seen, this at least to this level anyway. I mean, to go in and say, look at this, look at this, look at this. This needs to be done away with. These dollars need to be saved. These dollars don't need to be spent on this. This is not what the government should be doing. All this kind of stuff. This is awesome. This can lift your spirits, I guess, as it has mine at least. And its existence has inspired department heads to make bold decisions in their own right. Items that conservatives had criticized for decades, but believed they had no choice but to accept, and are now on the table. They're now there for the cutting. And some small agencies have been especially hit and abolished outright. Even the office is operating out of the organizational skin of the U.S. Digital Service, which is an entity established by President Barack Obama to bring Silicon Valley talent into government for short-term stints. And Obama created the legal structure for the group to operate out of the White House and set a precedent in partnership and partisanship. The old USDS was so overly liberal that when the Daily Wire visited its office on the White House complex on February 7th, it was taunting the president with a quote, "hate has no home here," unquote poster in its window. Yeah. that's what they were demonstrating. This is a government agency, okay, headed by the president of the United States. Now renamed the U.S. DOGE service, it is formally run by Amy Gleason. She's a healthcare executive who worked at USDS during the first Trump administration. Many of the contract terminations listed on DOGE's website have relied on tech expertise, axing shockingly expensive payments for software to Beltway consulting firms and things like this. The biggest contract terminations are nearly a $3 billion for an Office of Refugee Resettlement Influx Care Facility to house up to 3,000 unaccompanied alien children, unquote. Wow. The contract was to Family Endeavors, which hit a contracting jackpot after adding a former Biden administration official to its payroll. 500,000 children were separated from their parents because of the loophole that granted them the ability to stay in the U.S. if they were unaccompanied. The federal government kept the children secret from the state child welfare agencies, even though they were vulnerable to sex and labor traffickers, and 1/3 of unaccompanied minors disappeared after they were sent to live with, quote, sponsors, unquote. We covered that here on the podcast and how many children they lost in the system. Up to $1.9 billion was for a 7-year contract providing technology services to the IRS. The contract to Centennial Technologies was signed in August of last year, and no money was spent before it was canceled, which is obviously a good thing, right? According to federal records, that had taken place. And in the last 10 years, Centennial has been listed as receiving only $15 million in government contracts. Up to $1.7 billion to A1 Fed Impact LLC for tech work for the Defense Health Agency. Federal contracting records list the potential total as $2.4 billion. Here's another one. A $1 billion contract to Surgence LLC, another government IT company in the Virginia suburbs outside Washington, D.C., and that was cut in half. The contract was for multi-network support services for the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Didn't even know that was an agency. A proposed $318 million contract to the Office of Personnel Management for human resources related products and services. Well, that was canceled before it was awarded. So that's awesome. There's just right there, $318 million saved, just like that. The largest grants were that got canceled were these. A $2.6 billion from USAID to the Gavi Foundation for the Global Communities Immunization Agenda 2030, which um, immunization, Agenda 2030, which was endorsed by the World Health Assembly in May of 2020. Nearly $1 billion was spent before it was canceled. So they saved 2.6, but we did lose at least $1 billion there. A $1.5 billion contract from the Department of Health and Human Services to Texas to cut in half with no details provided. So who knows? It just was going there. Most of the money from a $1 billion USAID grant to the World Health Organization for polio and immunization was halted before it went out the door. Nearly $500 million was shaved off of a $1.5 billion grant to Public Health Foundation Enterprises, Inc., operating as Heluna Health. It was the name of that one. Since 1998, the nonprofit has received a few million per year from the Centers for Disease Control and the National Institute of Health, operating as a pass-through, of course, that sends the money to other groups performing public health research or interventions. And in 2020, they jumped to $500 million and nearly $3 billion in 2021. So obviously, this was a slush fund that was getting more and more popular as the years went on. In other ways, DOGE has fallen short of its hopes, sometimes after running into a buzzsaw of institutional Washington. I mean, you knew this was going to happen. Courts, appeal panels, unions, of course, and government rules have all bogged down attempts to implement layoffs or access government data. The fork in the road buyouts offered to federal employees to reduce salary expenses, modeled after the choice Musk offered to Twitter employees after acquiring the company, were underwhelming, with fewer employees accepting the offer than would typically retire or leave government on their own in a given year. And thousands of employees who didn't accept the buyout have since been targeted with reduction in forced layoffs, but some have been ordered reinstated by the courts and are now on paid leave. So that's kind of a nice thing for them, right? Well, no, I'm not going to do the buyout. And, oh, you laid me off? Well, we're going to go to court. Hey, the court's told me that I can collect my salary and not do any work. That's nice. For federal personnel rules, which the Office of Personnel Management has not moved to rewrite, give strong deference to employees with the longest tenure and could wind up pushing low-paid junior employees out of the workforce while keeping the more highly compensated and deeply entrenched ones, sometimes doing junior work at senior salaries. So basically, the person that gets ousted is the one that has the least in seniority, and so the senior type of employee, well, they end up doing the junior's work but get paid their senior salary. And so yeah, it's one of those things that it's going to take time for DOGE and for Trump to identify the things that need to be cut and get those things done, because you can identify them, but actually getting the swamp drained is sometimes a different issue. Katie Miller, a spokesperson for DOGE, declined to provide the Daily Wire with a list of DOGE's top accomplishments or comment on whether it's on track or not, but obviously it's done quite a bit. Ultimately, savings will only reduce the deficit if Congress aggressively slashes annual funding to agencies or pass rescission packages that claw back money that was previously appropriated. DOGE earned the support of the American people, even though its cuts could be painful, because Musk made a compelling case that spending money we don't have was irresponsible and would lead to a debt bomb where significant portions of federal expenditures did nothing more than pay interest on the past debt. We see that right now. Our second biggest expenditure, right behind Social Security, is the interest on the national debt. We already see that. But Republicans may weaken that justification and imperil support for DOGE by passing a budget that makes the deficit grow even faster, thanks to military spending increases and tax cuts that more than cancel out any spending savings. So far, the Republican-led government has not returned spending to pre-pandemic levels, much less cut it below that baseline. And between 2015 and 2018, the government spent about $5 trillion a year, according to the Treasury Department. Well, that jumped, of course, to $8 trillion in 2020 and 2021, and $7 trillion in 2024. And according to the Committee for the Responsible Federal Budget, the Republican-led Senate's plan for a 2025 budget would allow legislators to add $5.8 trillion to deficits over the next 9 years and require only 0.005% of projected spending through 2034 to be cut in order to pay down the deficit. And it said that the Senate plan's lack of spending reductions coupled with the tax breaks mean that it would be worse for the deficit than major welfare programs and Joe Biden's American Rescue Plan. And the Senate plan would cut only a few billion from Democratic priorities like urban affairs, while adding hundreds of billions in deficit spending to Republican priorities like military. Well, there are a few things where there's opportunities for savings, and these are the things. There's about 4 things here: reform food stamps to exclude junk food and corner store type things, right? So, I mean, there's no reason for, if you're on food stamps, which it's not called food stamps now, it's SNAP or whatever, but there's no reason if you're on public assistance like that you should be using that money for junk food. Just no reason for it. Abolish the $2 billion Job Corps. We've done a podcast on the Job Corps and how terrible things are there. Reform Social Security's disability program. We've talked about that on podcast as well. The disability program is out of control. And abolish all social science funding. There's no reason to be funding DEI or CRT or any of this. And so just those 4 reforms would be significant. And I like Ben Shapiro. He gave an opinion piece, and this is what he said. So we have been hearing for a while that the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, under the tutelage of Elon Musk, has been a giant failure. We've been hearing this from the legacy media, who have been saying that all the cuts are basically fake, that nothing is happening, that it's chaos that's wrecking the country. It is true that not one Social Security check has been stopped. The Medicaid and Medicare checks are also still going out. The government, unfortunately, is still running much as before. But much spending has really been stopped. There's been an open question as to how much spending will be stopped. How much can be temporarily frozen versus actually just cut? Will firing these employees actually stick? But Democrats are caterwauling because it turns out DOGE has been quite effective in stopping an enormous amount of spending. Trillions of dollars? No. It is hundreds of billions of dollars. That's the case. And according to Reuters, this is what Reuters said. It said U.S. President Donald Trump's administration has so far withheld at least $436.87 billion of congressionally approved funding. That's almost $500 billion. The top Democrats on the U.S. Congress Appropriation Committee said this on Tuesday. The frozen allotments span the federal government according to the first estimate of the potential impoundments in the project led by Senator Patty Murray from Washington and Representative Rosa DeLauro from Connecticut. Almost $42 billion was frozen or canceled for the State Department, including the frozen support for USAID, along with another $62 billion plus in compensated grant funding for the Transportation Department, according to the estimate. And the Democrats also detailed $943 million frozen for the Head Start early education program. Head Start is one of the great failures in federal history. The data on Head Start has been pretty solid for a long time now, showing effectively no difference between kids who go to Head Start and kids who do not. There's always been there's also been some $10 billion frozen and canceled for the National Resources Conservation Service as well here. Democrats, of course, are very angry about all of this. All the spending is going to have to be, put permanently into the no spend category by Congress. And DOGE can identify it and they can look at it, but it's got to be Congress that solidifies this. They can do so with a simple 50-vote majority in the Senate. That is presumably the path Congress is going to have to take. The focus needs to move to Congress, because the truth is that President Trump and DOGE can temporarily freeze a lot of these funds, but unless it's rescinded by Congress, it will go right back into place after a certain period of time. This is the reason why Democrats are freaking out about all of this. They're worried that Republicans are going to start passing rescission bills that would make many of the freezes permanent and then turn the freezes into cuts. According to Reuters, the administration has cited Musk's Department of Government Efficiency and the undoing of the federal government diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives as reasons for blocking congressionally approved funding. The question is how much the executive branch can actually block that funding under the 1974 Impoundment Control Act. Usually, the president has to tweak levels by proposing cuts. That would be the rescission. That has not happened so far, which brings us to Congress. Right now, it would be an act of political magic. Every time you get a Republican majority together, it's a bit of political magic. The reason for that is because the Republican House majority is unbelievably narrow. Even the Senate of the United States will have to acknowledge that Senators Susan Collins of Maine, of course, and Lisa Murkowski of Arkansas are likely to go the other way on major legislation. That cuts the GOP majority to 51 votes. There are still holdovers like Mitch McConnell, who may vote against something President Trump wants. He's had a history there. There are a wide variety of other senators and that have various interests and things like that. So getting the whole thing together is it's an attempt to herd cats by the Senate Majority Leader John Thune, as well as the Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. And can they do it? Well, that's the question, right? That is the question. And so what we're seeing now is that DOGE has done their job. Well, I mean, they're still doing it, but they've done the initial wave, right? They've gone in, they've seen things that were, for lack of a better term, low-hanging fruit. And they have seen things that were obvious that needed to be cut. They were obvious things that the government should not be funding, that they should not be spending our taxpayer dollars on. Again, we have a $36 trillion debt. And to say that, well, these are just small things. Well, all these little small things add up, right? And so DOGE has gone in and they've done their initial look at things. And yes, they will continue to do work and they will continue to find things. But who needs to do their work now? Well, that's Congress. And because we have and when it comes to the GOP, when it comes to the Republican Party, they have such a narrow lead in both the Senate and the House that it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult to codify these. These might be only temporary reductions. These might be only temporarily frozen. Can they be put into place permanently? Can these cuts stay permanent? And that is the question, and that is what we're going to have to watch when it comes to Congress. And you may want to, call your congressman or whatever and let them know that this needs to be done, and it needs to be done right away because, as I've said before, we're in a 2-year window. Yes, Trump is president for 4 years, but if he doesn't have the House and the Senate, then it's just going to be a stalemate. And so to do the things that need to be done, to continue on doing these wonderful things and trying to squeeze the belt and get us back into a healthy financial situation, it's going to take Congress to do its job and to do its job now. I would love to hear from you on it. I would love to hear what you think and what you see as important here. And of course, you can always do that at uncommonsensepodcast.com. We're on YouTube now, so I would love for you to subscribe, share, like all that stuff. It really does help us out. And thank you for listening. This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications.